Good evening. Welcome to the Glazov gang. Tonight, quote-unquote easy meat inside the world of Muslim rape gangs in the United Kingdom. Our guest once again, Gavin Boby of the Law and Freedom Foundation in the United Kingdom. Gavin, welcome back to the show.
Hello, Jamie. Nice to talk to you again.
You are joining us again. Last week we did part one, and just in terms of the discussion and some more reading and investigation I've done, we've really got to do part two. So I've got you back here, Gavin. Thank you for all the work that you're doing.
It's a pleasure.
We skimmed the surface of this horrifying reality, Gavin. Let us begin. But I read your group's report, Easy Meat, and just devastating. I'll just start overall with the fact that thousands, if not tens of thousands, who knows, but these girls represent women all across the world, across Europe. But what's happening is that there are Muslims involved in rape gangs inspired by Islamic ideology, and they are going out seeking young infidel girls and bringing them into slavery, sexual slavery, torturing, abusing them. And what's happening is, because of political correctness and because of leftist ideology, our society's handicapped to do anything about it. This is just devastating. But let's begin. Gavin, tell us, let's start once again. Tell us about your report, Easy Meat, and why you wrote it.
Well, this report, Easy Meat, it is, we think it is the definitive report on this problem of what is referred to as localized grooming. That is, men from the same town who get together and deliberately go out to target young girls, usually girls of about 12 or 13 years old, and enslave them and destroy them sexually. The pattern of abuse being seduction, abuse, addiction, then prostitution, and then enslavement. And the stories are really horrific about what happened to these girls. And the authorities, this has been going on, we think, for about 25 years, and the authorities are only now just beginning to want to appear to do something about it. Query whether they can do anything effective about it at all. But it is a disgrace. It can only be called a cover-up, the way the authorities have treated it.
Well, Gavin, the tragedy in terms of how the left works here, let me just use a metaphor here. Let's say there is the color purple. There's a purple color that promotes evil. And there are purple people part of this purple color. And the purple people are running around raping and torturing and destroying non-purple people. But in the society of non-purple people, there is an ideology that you're not allowed to see color. And that's more important to our society at the moment than to save thousands of innocent girls. And that's what the left is really all about, isn't it? And this is just, it's a disgrace. And I read your report, and it's not that it's new to me, because my life is dedicated to the victims of female genital mutilation, honor killings, and forced marriage under Islamic gender apartheid. And the feminists in the West, the leftist feminists, they say nothing, because ideology is more important to them than actual human beings. Can you talk a little bit about that in terms of your frustration in what you know is happening to non-Muslim girls in your country, and they're not being protected because of this leftist need to defend and protect Islamic religion and culture?
Yes, you're exactly right. That is what is happening to those girls, and that is the response of the authorities. You have local child protection authorities repeatedly laying down the line to their employees, sending out memos, sending out guidelines saying there is no religious or ethnic connection to this crime, when it is perfectly clear, when you look at the reliable data, and the only reliable data that we have, because the government doesn't provide it, local authorities don't provide it, the only reliable data we have is from the court system, convictions, and where you see there is that over 90%, about 91% of the men convicted of this offence are Muslim men. It isn't about colour, it's about ideology. And it makes sense why it should be. It's about mindset, about attitudes towards women, attitudes towards girls. And those child protection authorities and police authorities and other authorities will not protect them. There are some horrific stories of girls going back again and again to abortion clinics explaining, this is what is happening to me, turning up at school bedraggled, obviously having spent all night up and the teachers ignoring it, because, with taxi drivers, Muslim taxi drivers, waiting outside the school gate to pick those girls up and no one doing anything about it. And it's only now that the authorities want to appear to be doing something, and I don't think they're going to be able to. It is a terrible problem, an extremely dangerous, very inflammatory problem.
Yeah, and once again, human life is sacrificed on the altar of utopian ideals when it comes to the left. You know, I just have to tell you, this report you wrote, Gavin, it's really been on my mind the last couple of days. I've actually lost some sleep over it. It really touched my heart. It disturbed me. My heart is with those young girls. I'm very troubled by the evil that report unveiled. And I'm trying to think now, at this moment, what direction I want to go into, because there's something I was thinking, in terms of Easy Meat, this report. Why isn't this report on the curriculum of every single women's studies department curriculum across the United States and in the West? Now, we know that answer, but you would think that women's rights groups and academics and professors that are for women's rights would be interested and would be concerned in terms of what's happening to young girls. Now, that's my statement here. I know that we agree with this. Gavin, let's try to use our discretion and not horrifying our audience too much, but at the same time, we want to tell a little bit of the truth of what's actually happening to these girls. With your discretion, can you paint a little bit of a picture for our audience of the brutality and barbarity that they're facing with these gangs?
Well, yes, you're quite right. Discretion is needed because it is so horrific. I could tell just really horrific tales that would make people turn the interview off. As I explained, if you imagine the basic pattern, you usually get some kind of lover boy. I think in Holland he's referred to as a Romeo, and he might be about 17, and he'll go to a girl of 12 or 13, flatter her, take her out in a mid-range sports car, give her a small bottle of vodka to drink, perhaps share soft drugs with her, tell her she's beautiful, and really make her feel good about herself, and then perhaps for the first time in her life, and will deliberately try to target a vulnerable girl as well. And there is literature where Muslim men appear to be distributing leaflets saying, go for uglier girls because they are easier to seduce. So you get that pattern of seduction. Then it's, I want to introduce you to my cousin, I want to introduce you to my uncle. So you then get the pattern of abuse. And then she's introduced to more drugs and made dependent upon drugs. And then she's prostituted out. And that tends to be, the common story is of a 13-year-old girl in a room with 10 men, 10 customers at once. And finally, she is just treated like a slave, subjected to horrific violence, and sexually destroyed. And I think that the horrific nature of what is happening to these girls says something about the motivation here, because it appears to be, I would say, it's more about destruction than about sex, than about prostitution. In general, I mean, I'm not an expert on this, but in general, men who visit prostitutes, they tend not to want to do it, 10 men in a room at a time. And they tend not to want to do the extreme violence that these men do to these girls. I mean, I mentioned last time one example of a girl getting her tongue nailed to the table. I mean, that's not about sex, that's about domination and destruction. And this seems to fit with the annihilationist, the destructionist mentality within Islam, the way Islam approaches rival or preceding cultures. I think you can see traits of this in FGM, female genital mutilation, where I'd say between about half and a third of Muslim women are subjected to this. Now that's not about oppression or abuse. That's again an extremely an annihilationist approach to women, really trying to destroy female sexuality. And I think you can see that same trait in these Muslim rape gangs' treatment of their non-Muslim victims. So it is borne out by ideology.
And Gavin, your report does say that there has to be perhaps a word created or something close to genocide, because that is really what is happening here. This is a war of annihilation. It's a war to destroy sexual pleasure, autonomy, independence, equilibrium, everything. It's a war on women. And so what I wanted to say also, and what you point out, is that we will never see eye to eye with the left on this issue, because where they are tying our hands behind our back is saying all cultures are equal, all religions are equal. What you point out, the report points out, and we know that in our society, if I was sitting next to just some guy and he said, let's get together on the weekend, you know, and we'll go out and we'll just find a 12-year-old girl and we'll brutalize her and rape her and maim her and make her part of a slave camp. The other people standing around would say, no, that's not a good idea. Maybe some of us should call the police. Unless, of course, there's a chance that one psychopath's standing next to another psychopath. But this is contrary to our values. This is contrary to our religion, whether it's Judaism or Christianity or Buddhism or what have you. But in Islam, in Islamic doctrine, as you point out, when these Muslim men are making these plans, this is normal. This is inspired by Islamic theology. This is sanctioned by Islamic theology. And this is what the left cannot accept and why they're tying our hands behind our back. But can you speak a little bit on that in terms of this is cultural, this is religious?
Oh, very much so. It is very much inspired by religious doctrine. You see it in the UK, it's primarily Pakistani, Bengali, Afghan and Somali men. In the Netherlands, it is Moroccan men. In other parts of the continent, I think in France, it's Algerian men. The common denominator is not race, it is not nationality, it is religion. That is what is driving this offence, and you see it within Islamic doctrine. The Quran is clear. It gives clear instructions about how you marry, have sex with, and then divorce a girl before she reaches puberty. You have the account of Muhammad's life. He took sexual slaves. His followers took sexual slaves. He praised his followers for taking sexual slaves. His, quote, favourite wife was 6 when he married her, and when he consummated the marriage, she was 9. Another wife, whom he took, Safiya, she was a Jewish lady. He tortured her husband to death by pouring molten metal onto his chest. She was 17. That very night, he took her to his tent and married her and had sex with her. Again, in America, that would be U.S. unlawful sexual intercourse. So this happens within Islamic doctrine, and Muslim men or Muslim people are required to imitate Muhammad. This is driven by Islamic doctrine.
And as your report points out, you know, some of the investigations they were doing, the knowledge that they have of members of these rape gangs, Muslim rape gangs, they were saying that a lot of these Muslim rapists are actually considered good Muslims. They're praying and fasting during the daytime and then prowling and prying at night on girls that they consider are barely human. So this isn't people, these aren't people going against their religion. These are actually people following their religion. And this is a point we have to keep beating away at.
Yes, absolutely right. You get these cases coming to court, and then you find the background of these men. A recent case, I think 2 of the men were active in their local mosque. I think one was a preacher in his local mosque. I mean, and this shows the difference between Islamic culture and Judeo-Christian culture. You don't get rabbis, you don't get vicars clubbing together with mates that they know locally and saying, let's go out and find 12, 13-year-old girls that we can rape and sexually enslave. That is not happening, but it is within Islamic culture. And the authority, particularly left-wing or feminist academics, will not face up to this, because religious identity for them appears to trump feminism. It appears to trump the rights, any rights, amongst women. And you get the ridiculous instance, one instance of a couple of academics, left-wing academics, writing a report saying these men, this is nothing to do with the Islamic religion. The reason this is nothing to do with the Islamic religion is that the men doing it are not really Muslims. The reason why the men doing it are not really Muslims is because Islam is not supposed to allow men to do this. Well, that's wrong. Islam does allow it, it encourages it, and to a certain extent it mandates this kind of offence. It has to be stamped on. very hard because it is extremely inflammatory. If it is not stamped out, then it will be dealt with through public disorder. It will get dealt with one way or another if the authorities don't deal with it.
And as you pointed out, the Sikhs finally started taking some vigilante justice because the authorities wouldn't. We only have a couple minutes left. Gavin, I was very interested in the techniques of these Muslim rape gangs. And the report points out, you talked about this earlier, that they get this vulnerable girl. Some of them maybe not very attractive, some of them with problems in their family or they ran away. But they begin to flatter. But I was very interested that they try to drive a wedge between these girls and their parents, and they tell the girls that their parents are racist, and they portray themselves as victims. And I'm very interested at what they're nurturing here, what this inspires in a young girl. There's a little bit of a utopian virus that they're accessing because the girl senses some kind of injustice and believes that she's somehow on the side of justice and she's going to help these poor victimized people, right? It's a little bit of a psychopath, the way they portray themselves as victims, and then they take over you. Can you talk a little bit about how they trap these young girls through these tactics?
Yes, I would say that psychopathic is a very good word. It's extremely calculated, extraordinarily ruthless. And these men, the Romeo figures, will do that to these young girls and then immediately say, I love you, your parents can't stop our love, they're racist, they're trying to come between us. And that then drives a wedge between these girls and their parents. There is a myth that some establishment figures appear to want to put about, that these girls are all vulnerable, they're all girls who are in care, therefore you don't have to worry about them, you don't have to count their suffering as valid, you don't have to protect them. A vulnerable girl doesn't have to be protected. That's the line that appears to be getting pushed by some people, and that is wrong. It's only 14% of these girls who are girls in care. That's quite a high percentage, but it's still a small minority of those girls. Plenty of those girls live with their parents, live with both parents. They get these men working on them and dividing them from the rest of their family, and until those families have to separate themselves off from those daughters because they find other members of their family, other daughters are at risk as well. It is as ruthless as that.
Yeah, it's very interesting how these evil cults, they very much need to demonize the family members and to cut them off from the family members, but also to portray themselves as victims. I want to continue this with you the next time. Gavin, Boby, we only have 20 seconds left or so. What can our viewers do that want to help do? They can contact your organization, Law and Freedom Foundation. What else can concerned citizens do to fight on behalf of these young girls in the UK and throughout the world?
I think the main thing, ordinary people can do is just to keep an eye out and not to be snowed by politically correct establishment doctrine. So when I was a boy, perhaps when you were a boy, I was told, don't take sweets from strange men in the park. So if a man had approached me offering me sweets in the park, I would have known to steer clear of him. But people are not allowed to say, don't let your daughters get seduced by older Muslim boys, older Muslim men. There's a danger there. People need to be able to overcome that sense of shame that the authorities want to instill in people about that issue. It is a live issue. It is a dangerous issue. People need to be aware.
You know, Gavin, Boby, I come from a totalitarian, evil empire. Communism, the Soviet Empire, murdered millions of my people, persecuted my family. And when we came to the West, these leftists, they tried to put a curtain to hide the victims. And they continue to do that. And when I read your report, you know, I just wanted to tell you on a personal level, thank you so much for ripping that curtain down and showing the monstrosity of our enemies and standing up so honorably and nobly for the victims of Islamic gender apartheid. Thank you so much for what you're doing.
Thank you, Jamie. It's a pleasure.
Okay, keep up the good fight, my friend. Gavin Boby, ladies and gentlemen, of the Law and Freedom Foundation, a modern-day freedom fighter. And we'll see you next week on the Glazov Gang.